So good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome from our modest studio here in Berlin to today's webinar, which is co-hosted by the European Platform for Democratic Elections and Warsaw-based Political Accountability Foundation, which is also a member of the EPDE network. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that this will be a timely and provoking discussion. My name is Adam Busulanu, and I'm moderating this discussion. I'm a senior program officer at the EPDE Secretariat here in Berlin. So today we're looking at the recent presidential elections in Poland, which we think is not just a kind of national event, but we look at it as a potential sign of things to come across the region and beyond. Poland's presidential campaign, we just concluded in Poland, and there are still many claims and complaints in process. We think that it may mark a turning point in how democratic elections are conducted, how they are fought, and how they are protected, or how they could be protected. What we saw was a campaign that moved away from traditional structures and key institutions that should guarantee the integrity of the electoral process towards mass use of digital platforms that became a key player in the campaign, where influencer became candidates, and their main campaign method was to conduct interviews. They get viral interviews with other candidates that blurred roles between journalism, entertainment, and politics. At the same time, we feel that institutions that are meant to safeguard electoral integrity, like the National Election Commission, but also other regulators, remained largely passive, while other actors, like the platforms, but also the regulatory bodies, they either lacked clear mandates or declined to act for the sake of freedom of speech. This created space for disinformation and confusion. And we saw even on election day, like informal players who stepped into the election process, using unauthorized tools to verify and intimidate voters under the label of civic engagement. So it was a kind of a pack of events and processes we haven't seen before to that extent in the Polish elections. And all of this raises some key questions, big questions for all of us working in the field of elections and the democratic governments. First, are we seeing a new normal where formal institutions are sidelined and digital campaigning remains largely unregulated? What happens when political discussion becomes entertainment? And how we assess the fact that campaign discussions are monetized by candidates, influencers? Can tools like the EU's regulations, Digital Service Act, Media Freedom Act, etc., can those tools actually help? Did we invest enough in the enforcement? And finally, how much should we tolerate in the name of free expression. Is everything acceptable from the ethical perspective that is legal? We are also seeing signs that this is not just about Poland, right? Many of the patterns emerging here, polarization, institutional weakness, decreasing role of traditional media, lacking trust in such media, while social media being the main campaign area, many of these patterns can already be observed across Central and Eastern Europe and beyond. To help us unpack these issues, we were joined today by excellent experts. They've been monitoring these elections closely from legal, political, ethical, and digital perspectives. And I hope they will help us understand not only what happened in Poland, but also what it means for democratic resilience in the years ahead. Before we jump into the discussion, I'd like to mention that this discussion is recorded and will be posted on the EPDE YouTube channel. And then we use the Q&A function throughout the whole discussion. So please feel free to ask your questions anytime so I can forward them to our experts. So let me introduce the experts, Zosia Ludkiewicz, who is our colleague, who is the president of the Political Accountability Foundation, as I said, member of the EPDE. And Zosia is also a member of the board of EPDE and also a member of the board of the global network of domestic election monitors. She is a democracy and civil society expert focused on electoral integrity and citizen engagement and has an experience from several years working in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. We have also Dominika Bychawska-Siniarska, who is a human rights lawyer, a PhD in law, expert on freedom of expression for the Council of Europe, and she's affiliated also with the Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights. And last but not least, we have Sonia Horondziak, a director of the Democracy and Civil Society program at the Institute of Public Affairs. She is a doctor of political science and administration, graduated from the famous Jagiellonian University in Krakow. And she's also a research, she also did a research scholarship at the Technische Universität in Dresden. So herzlich willkommen, Sonia. She's also author of many publications in the field of political polarization, democratic theory, and electoral processes. So Sonia, let me start with you. You've conducted social media monitoring during the last campaign. What risks and what opportunities arise when political campaigning shifts almost entirely to digital platforms? What are the key findings from your monitoring?
Thank you for your question. And of course, welcome everyone. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Greetings from Warsaw. And it's a bit gloomy today in Warsaw, and maybe what I will share with you will also be a bit gloomy, but I hope we can, end with a positive messaging. Because yes, we've conducted together with Democracy Reporting International social media monitoring of this presidential campaign, and a couple of things draw our attention that maybe differed from the other political campaigns and races in the past. Of course, I wouldn't say it's anything new that the internet space, online space is gaining more and more attention. This is natural, and this is, of course, the biggest opportunity for the politicians to actually reach wider audiences. There's no doubt about it. However, as everything in the political scope, things should be regulated. And unfortunately for Poland, they are not, or at least not sufficiently, so that the campaign can be, not only run through, for example, social media, but also understand by the recipients who is actually talking to them, who is advertising. And this was unfortunately not so clear during this campaign. So maybe I will focus only on a couple of points that were particularly interesting to us during this social media monitoring. So of course, we know that Poland is a quite polarized society. And also this polarization was visible through the social media campaign. So we, for example, examined the sentiment of the posts of the messages that all of the 13 candidates posted throughout the campaign. And many of the candidates, we categorize them, positive, neutral, or negative. And many of the candidates produced only positive or negative information posts, So focusing mostly on the very emotionally charged messaging towards their audiences, and of course the negative messagings mostly focusing on criticizing the opponents and their political views, were very prominent and actually constituted 1/5 of every post of every candidate throughout the first round of the campaign. So this was something that drew our attention. We did not see many candidates who presented mainly positive or neutral. People were rather like to be, very specific, and specific meant very positive on some topics and quite negative on others. However, just negative messaging is nothing that bad. But if it draws towards disinformation and unfortunately hate speech, it raises a problem. And this is also something that we look upon and notice that when it comes to disinformation, practically all of the candidates use disinformation messages for their campaigning. Some, however, used it especially when targeting special groups, like, for example, migrants or LGBTQ plus representatives, or migrants, especially Ukrainians or Jews. This was mainly done by, for example, Grzegorz Braun, also Sławomir Mencen, and also the president-elect Karol Nawrocki did not shy away from multiple disinformation messages, consisting very harsh language and sometimes even bearing the notions of hatred toward a certain groups. However, as I was saying, I think Grzegorz Braun is, and Sławomir Mencen, but Grzegorz Braun is a particular example here, because in the case of his posting, there was actually not much doubt whether this is a very controversial message on his side. And what is a problem? The problem was, of course, lack of the reaction. So you can post, you can make the information towards the big social media platform that you think this post is inappropriate. You could use the official State Research Institute that was designed to, take care of the cybersecurity, especially during the elections, that is NASC. However, we still, and to this day, can see those messages, disinformation messages, also very aggressive messages on their profiles, which means that the system, unfortunately, is very lacking when it comes to fast and timely response. Because maybe probably in the future, someone will collect all the information and delete those particular posts. But what is important is to react during the very campaign. So I would say this is one of the biggest challenges that we've observed during this social media monitoring. And the second thing is what you've actually, Adam, already mentioned, was the very unusual participation of some candidates and the forum in which they participated in the campaign. So usually what we expect from the political campaign is for the candidates to advocate for themselves, talk about themselves, their program, maybe sometimes criticize opponent. This is also natural. However, in this campaign, we have the candidates, like already mentioned, Krzysztof Stanowski, who interviewed all their candidates, all of the candidates, actually. He conducted 13 interviews, including one with himself, with the help of his colleague. So it was very particular to see, him taking a stance as a YouTuber, maybe journalist. He's a sport journalist, and take part at the same time as a presidential candidate, and also portraying himself actually as the anti-candidate. So he often stated that he does not want to be selected, and he is a part of this race only to unravel, the mysteries behind the electoral process, which is, very bizarre for a political race in general. We have also other candidates, like, for example, Joanna Senyshyn, who used, memes and irony as the main driver of this campaign. So her political messaging revolved mainly about kind of ridiculing, but also ironizing the whole process of participation. I believe that was supposed to, attract maybe younger audiences. However, it did not convey the actual much of the messaging that the presidential candidate should convey about his own personal program. And lastly, what I would like to mention was the case of course, Sławomir Mencen and his interviews with the second round candidates, Rafał Trzaskowski and Karol Nawrocki, which actually became an internet sensation. This was done through YouTube, and surprisingly, even the main television station, including the public television, but also the main private one, streamed these interviews live, which showed how important this, not to look at it in a different social media occurrence, streamed to the even more traditional form of political, campaigning. And it was very bizarre because, of course, it also blew the lines of what is the actual purpose of partaking in such a high amounts of the third candidate to the campaigning of the two final candidates? What does it tell us actually about the program, about the system, and what can we expect from it? So to summarize, I would say this was a very, very surprising campaigns with the many twists and turns on their side, especially on the candidates, because usually we expect, some external forces to maybe spread disinformation or hate speech, or maybe some influence the elections. We are prepared for that. But when everything surprising comes directly from the candidates, this is something rather unexpected. And this is something to, think about and maybe look once more at our regulations to see if this is what we should left unregulated, or maybe we should take a closer look and maybe be more harsh when it comes to regulating that sort of campaign.
Thank you, Sonia. Dominika, this is perhaps a perfect starting point for your research and your work on elections. How effective are all these rules like Digital Service Act, Media Freedom Act, in addressing these challenges? I know that your position is more liberal in in assessing how much what is allowed during a campaign and beyond the campaign, or outside the campaign. But how you assess the regulations and the enforcement in the context of the Polish election?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Adam and the FPD for having me here today. Unlike my predecessor and like both experts that will be talking today, I'm not election researcher or election expert, but whole my professional life was devoted to freedom of expression. So, and freedom of expression is the core of democracy. So during the electoral campaigns, freedom of expression plays obviously the crucial role. Therefore, in my speech, I would like to refer to 3 points. So the first one would be to assess how much a politician can be and become an influencer, a question that was raised before by Sonia. The second thing would be about the influence of social media into the electoral processes, namely applying algorithmic bias, and that was something we have seen and have been reported about TikTok, but also other platforms. And also we had issues with financing social media campaigns, which raised doubts and I think was not entirely clarified. But here the question and that point raises how much the current legal instruments are responding to such procedures. And the very brief last point would be about the role of traditional media that I think failed entirely and has been even more compromised during these elections. So about the first point being the politicians becoming influencers, we have a number of new instruments that have been undertaken mostly by the Council of Europe, one in 2022, saying that influencer is not limited to commercial actors. It includes any individual who can significantly affect public discourse through visibility, credibility, or reach. Therefore, politicians, and especially during campaign periods, embody all three threats. So they are affecting public discourse through visibility, credibility, or reach. Obviously, when politicians act as influencers, unfortunately, their engagement can intensify what the Council of Europe has termed as information disorder. Because first of all, politicians obviously have high trust and exceptional reach. The words are amplified not only by followers, but also by mainstream media, as has been mentioned by Sonia earlier, but also through digital algorithms. So basically, this allows them to spread misleading context by bypassing the traditional journalists, which are gatekeeping usually and should be gatekeeping. And their message is spreading rapidly and often go unchallenged. The second thing, how they impact, is that basically there is kind of loophole in their accountability for the information they spread. And here, to some extent, the European Court of Human Rights is trying to respond to that challenge through their pretty recent case law. And I'm thinking here mostly about the case Sanchez versus France, which said whenever a politician on their social media is spreading hate speech, or most importantly, when hate speech is spread by someone who is commenting on a speech by the politician will be held accountable and is obliged to moderate the social media they are running. So this gives additional obligation to them. There is obviously also an aspect of how much politicians having information that are inside information are able to convey them with no responsibility through their media, spreading malinformation. So in general, the conclusion is looking into the legislative framework, politicians can be influencers and they are allowed to be influencers. However, the strength of them becoming influencer and using social media and provokes that they actually enforce and even deteriorate or impact the information disorder, which we have to tackle all the time. Now the question is how much the influence on social media during election is well responded by international instruments or EU instruments. So we have the Digital Service Act that is binding but not enforced everywhere in Europe. And the Digital Service Act is giving some of the response to some of the issues that are happening on social media during the elections. So first of all, it has a transparency obligation on social platforms for advertisements and recommender systems. It also has imposes the duty for a mandatory risk assessment for systemic risk, including those related to electoral processes. It also includes some crisis response mechanism for disinformations that are happening, and mostly disinformation campaigns that are happening in sensitive periods. It also has a prohibition on targeting users with political ads based on sensitive personal data. However, what has to be said, the DSA is not designed specifically for the election period. So that provokes that it has some gaps. So in the DSA, we will not find any specific rules for politicians or influencers. There are no harmonized definition of political advertisements. So the DSA will rely on national laws or the upcoming political advertising regulation of the EU. It also have weak enforcement, unfortunately, of risk mitigation duties. So although platforms are expected to assess and mitigate systemic risks to elections, but actually the enforcement mechanism is not really happening, and the European Commission audit capacity remains limited. And there are no mandatory real-time election safeguards. So unlike traditional media rules, there are no requirement in the DSA for equal access or fact-checking or of viral content during the campaigns. All this provokes that we actually do not have a proper regulatory mechanism at that stage that will tackle what is going on in social media during electoral campaign. And the last concluding point would be about the role of traditional media. What has happened during the Polish election campaign is we saw an even greater polarization among media that were unfortunately taking a strong political position towards the candidate. So especially one of the mainstream media actually is the biggest news portal in Europe as far as readers are concerned. On it has been revealing story after story about one of the candidates in the second round of elections, targeting Mr. Nawrocki. But what is striking was actually the very weak reliance on sources and the explanation of where these, from a perspective of journalistic ethics and journalistic deontology, there was a weak explanation from where the information came, how the sources were gathered, and why this is all happening in the very last moment, and why it is so much targeting also the private life of the politician. And obviously, the rule is you can say everything what you want about the politician as far as it concerns its public activity, but do not enter in the private life unless it is affecting the public activities. So through these kind of activities, the media position and media trust has been, I think, deteriorated, and we all leave this campaign with a feeling of a lot of hate and a lot of really negative emotions that has been triggered by the media. So I think their role has to be rethought. And I remember back in 2008, a study conducted by Oxford University, and at that time, Professor Zielonka, saying that Poland was one of the countries having the highest level of trust among for journalistic activities, together with doctors and priests. I guess currently this trust has deteriorated significantly, and the last Central European studies also conducted by the same team show that the trust for journalistic activity has deteriorated very much, and is at the level of 30% respondents having still the trust. So this has to be rethought, and their role in this extremely polarized situation has to be amended as well. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Dominika. Zosia, is it only about trust in the institutions, or is the story also about institutions lacking instrument to tackle all those challenges? We saw that institutions in Poland were rather passive in addressing what happened during the electoral campaign. Are we observe a kind of deinstitutionalization of the electoral process where other actors are taking a key role in conducting or in campaigning and in influencing the whole space?
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for the question. I think it's a bit about both, because on one hand, it is about giving up space, but when you're giving space to other people, you're immediately losing the trust that people had in yourself. I would like to take the example of the National Election Commission and the situation we had with one of the, let's say, party affiliated NGOs that came up with a system to allegedly verify absentee voting certificates and to convince precinct election commission members not to allow, not to issue ballots to voters whose absentee voting certificate has allegedly been already used. Let me first say that there is no way of verifying it in Poland right now. There is no regulation. This was just an initiative by one of the right-wing affiliated communities or organizations that was partially aimed at basically eroding people's trust in the electoral system, specifically in the absentee voting certificates. Because, and a bit of context here, in Poland, every election we issue more and more of those AVCs because it's, first of all, we have a centralized voter register since 2023, so it's easy, and also it is a way of facilitating people voting, because with an APC, a person can vote in any polling station, be it in country or abroad. So it's easy for people to get an APC and to just be able to vote wherever they are. However, for a couple years now, some domestic forces have been using the number of those APCs issued as some kind of proof that that they are being used for people to vote multiple times, or to kind of skew the result between districts in other types of elections. And what we saw this year, people trying to actually ban people from receiving ballots and from voting based on some kind of artificial verification system that has not been sanctioned by anyone. I think that just crossed whichever red line and whichever barrier we had. And I think my biggest issue with that is the absence of reaction from the institutions. And this is exactly what we've been talking about. I think for this, the National Election Commission, both around the first round and also before the second round, where these voices gained so much more traction, had many opportunities to explain to voters how AVCs are issued, how do they work, how they're verified, how they're securitized, and what happens to them. To basically build the public's trust and the understanding of the process. The National Election Commission did not make a good use of this opportunity, and when it has been asked on election day, on the second round of the election, about this artificial unsanctioned application that to verify the numbers of AVCs, it did not come out with a strong denial. And to me, as an election expert, but also to me as a voter, was incredibly confusing, because you have a system that has been fought and imagined by God knows who, that is being used. And we know that there have been some cases, not many cases, fortunately, but that is being used to deny people's right to vote. And the highest electoral institution in the land is just saying, well, we don't have any provision that would say that the precinct election commission members cannot write down the numbers of ABCs. So the fact that the election administration in those crucial moments, and this has just been one of them, but there have been more, has been unable to come up with either a strong denial or a positive information campaign, or just quickly react to crises, leaves, first of all, means that people who would normally look up to the election administration for solutions, for answers, they cannot find them there, because the election administration is not giving them such answers. But also this gives space to other actors, such as political actors with malign intents, to step in and try to skew the picture and not tell people what the situation really looks like, but explain it so it looks as if it is to their benefit. And I think a similar situation unfortunately happened with regards to the election results. As some of you may know, there have been a number of polling stations where there have been recounts ordered by the Supreme Court. I think the number right now is 13, so it is 13 out of 32,000. So the number is not significant, but the once those information about the mistakes that have been made in protocols from precinct election commissions, once those informations became public, there have been no strong voices that were able to, first of all, explain what the procedure would be, and also put into context what should happen now, and whether these alleged 13 precinct election commissions have any kind of impact on the election result. And what we saw and what we've been seeing in Poland over the last 2 weeks has been this wave of first of all, wave of anxiety, because if we don't know what happened on election day, then, well, can we really trust the result? To me, yes, we can trust the result, because we can analyze that if it is 13 commissions out of 32,000, then the result has not changed significantly. However, many people are seeking explanation what happened. Many people are doubting whether this is just those few election commissions, whether the scale of those irregularities has not been higher. And we really have not heard any strong voice from the election administration or from any other institution saying this is not a significant irregularity. Obviously, every irregularity has to be investigated, but the scale that we are seeing so far does not have an impact on the election result. And when we are looking at what is happening right now, and especially the electoral protests, electoral disputes, we have over 54,000 disputes that have been lodged with the Supreme Court. This is the second highest number ever. Obviously, a lot of those disputes are those kind of copy-paste disputes that have been just sent by people, by concerned citizens, and I'm not trying to discount their concerns. But this such a high number is also one of the consequences of people's doubts and people's worries and also maybe people's hopes that the election results maybe could have been different. And you have thousands and thousands of people who are asking for a full recount. There is no, as far as we know, there is no procedure that would warrant an unsubstantiated full recount in Poland. So we will not have that. And also there is no logical and there is no proof that would warrant such a recount. But somehow in people's minds, there is a doubt whether their votes have been counted fairly. And unfortunately, whatever the decision of the Supreme Court will be on the 1st of July, unfortunately, I think this is another election that will be kind of saved in people's memories as one that has had issues. And when we will be, discussing future elections and future cases, people will be coming back to this and saying, but what about 2025? What happened then? So I think this is, and just to wrap up, I think this is an important phenomenon, this absence of institutions, because whatever we can do as civil society to try to push the correct information out there, it will never fully supplement the voice of an independent, trusted public institution. We can only be a supportive voice, and we try to be it as much as we can. But I really regret that those instances where the National Election Commission and other institutions could have spoken, they could have said, this is how it is. Maybe the system is not perfect. We see that the system is not perfect. We will strive to make the system better for future elections. And maybe this is where the conversation could have started, but at least they could have reassured the public that there is somebody out there watching, and also somebody who thinks about what needs to be done moving forward, to make sure that similar situations that happened in this election will not repeat themselves moving forward.
Yeah, I think that there are several questions, right? And about whether this was, intentional somehow. Is if you see so many, recounts and mistakes and kind of, cases of basically falsified results. And on the other side, the very limited reaction of the election management body, which should be responsible of of dealing with those cases and preparing the whole system to make it resilient against this kind of mistakes if they are unintentional. So there is a couple of questions about this potential intentionality of this and how this should be tackled. The other question is perhaps about the lack of information, right? I mean, this is what Sonia said at the beginning, that the campaign was just about, emotional messages, and there was no neutral, which I would see also as a kind of, message not only from the candidates but also from the institutions, explaining the society, the relevance of the process and the procedures, and lack of this kind of information, allowing third actors, platforms, etc., to run the campaigns, basically to to completely cover up the whole system is very problematic, I think, and this is something which can have an impact on the other on the elections in the future in other countries in the region and perhaps beyond. We saw what happened in Romania recently, and I think both elections in Romania and in Poland had this kind of a problem of informational vacuum, or at least a vacuum of neutral information. I'm not sure, but maybe Sonia or Dominika, you want to comment what Zosia said, and I encourage also our audience to pose the questions to the Q&A section. Sonia, Dominika, any reactions to what Zosia said?
I mean, it's only very hard, but I have to, of course, agree because in Poland, Polish society, basically based on constitution, has a right to information. Yes, we have the right to public information that is understandable, easily accessed to us, and this is not respected right now. It weakens this trust to the most basic form of democratic participation, that is partaking in elections. And also what I found, very problematic is the fact that this political campaigning in Poland is so inefficiently regulated that right now practically every entity can enter the, political campaigning sphere and agitation without any control over it, which is not only problematic for what we've already discussed, but also if you want to, if someone wants to know, hey, how much this and this candidate spent on their campaigns? Very simple question, and a constitutional right of a repo as well, as I'm already said. There's no way of giving them the true information, because right now I can, of course, I don't know, someone would like to know how much this and this candidate spent on the political ad. I can, go to Facebook library or like Google library, look at the numbers, but then I look, okay, but there are also political advertisement on this candidate coming from other accounts. Oh, and there are other advertisements that are not marked political, but it seems like there are, it's very problematic that in the country, when we are guaranteed technically the right to know, we know very little about what is actually behind the process, and we need those anti-candidates to try to reveal us the information of the electoral campaign from the inside. But this is not the solution. The solution should be remodeling the whole way of how are we thinking about the elections. And I think this is something that it should be done with all the parties on board, because it will be profitable for all the parties, because in one environment one party will lose, in the other one. So let's make it so that everybody wins. I would say that.
Sonia, you raised a quite important question and about the regulations for the financing of the campaign. And what we saw in Poland is not the lack of information how much the candidates spent on the campaign, but how they used the campaign to actually to earn money and to gain millions using the status of a candidate like Stanowski or Mensen. The audience of their YouTube channels was huge during those interviews, and we saw it, but basically in the same direction, the same problem in Romania, as one of the candidates said, okay, I haven't spent any penny on my campaign, right? So this was mostly related to the third parties, campaigning for this particular candidate. But what we saw in Poland is completely, putting everything upside down, right? And so I think this should be also there. There's also lack of regulation of this kind of situations and processes. Dominika, I see you.
Yes,
You want to jump in.
Yeah, I totally agree with the financial issue, but to be
Dominika, I think you are muted.
sorry, something went wrong. Okay, so I totally agree about the lack of regulations and or lack of proper transparency as far as financing is concerned, and we are not ready for having those kind of situations where third parties are intervening with financial support. However, to be a little bit more positive, I think, and especially in comparison to Romania, in Romania, we saw that a lot of institutions at various steps of the electoral processes have failed. Since the beginning of checking the candidates properly and coming at the very late stage or after the vote with the information that someone is potentially linked to a foreign country, and malign country in that situation, showed how much at the very initial stage the institution failed. Then there was a number of failures during the whole process with no reaction over what was going on TikTok at the first round, and then this continued in the second round. So and at the end of the day, the Constitutional Court of Romania said, "Oh, we have to do something," and they were pushing on the very edge to clean up the situation as much as they could. But in Poland, I think we are not exactly in the same position. So luckily, and this was also mentioned by Zosia, there is a number of institutions that are reacting. So we have the prosecution that was open vis-a-vis a number of those electoral places where there were issues with counting the votes. There were information available on irregularities. So still, I'm not saying it's ideal, but still, I think we have some safeguards, institutional safeguards that are playing here the role, at least to clarify what went wrong. And obviously, I don't want to sound like idealizing, but I think in comparison to how much at least colleagues and lawyers from Romania were blaming the lack of institutional safeguards and saying how much they failed in all the process, I think we are not exactly in the same situation, and we are a little bit more lucky in that respect. I hope so, I guess.
And so maybe we have last 5 minutes. Now maybe we should wrap up in with and provide some recommendations how the system could be improved from your perspective, from your field of work and competency, where you see gaps they could be somehow filled, or some procedures they could be improved in order to to really make the institutional framework more robust for the elections. Maybe we start with Dominika and then go over to Sonia and let Zofia conclude from the perspective of domestic citizen election observers. Dominika.
Well, I think from the perspective of new technologies and social media, and the DSA is providing a provision that say we have to review at some stage whether this is effective or not. So I think incorporating the election period and the fact that the DSA is not responding to what is happening during the election period should be one of the things that civil society, but then European Commission should take into consideration while reviewing the impact of the regulation. I strongly believe in litigation. So whenever we see hate speech I guess the recommendation would be really to react over it and to pursue with litigation, especially when it's coming from public figures. And we have the standard saying that they have more duties and obligations toward this, especially in the electoral campaign. And well, I don't really have a recommendation towards the national and traditional media. I think this is a topic for another debate, probably, which would last weeks. So this would be my general comments.
Sonia.
Yeah, so from my side, maybe, of course, the first and the basic thing, we should regulate who actually in what form can partake in political agitation during the electoral campaign. I think this is the basics. However, I want to also provide very concrete example from the not so far away country, from the Lithuania, regarding the social media and, internet playing a role during the elections. They have a law there when anyone who partakes in the political campaigning have to produce their own, let's say, social media monitoring or in general media monitoring, and during the campaign, not after, during the campaign, enclose the information about where, in which media, traditional, online, in what form do they advertise and how much do they spend on it. And it provides, great example, and it limits the amount of uncontrolled, biased using of media and partaking of media, because every information on the political advertisement, especially paid political advertisement, has to be enclosed and made, of course, available to public, because this is the ultimate goal. And if that's one thing that I think we should take from our Lithuanian neighbors, I think that should be it.
Interesting case, indeed. Sasha.
Oh, so I could probably speak for an hour about recommendations, but let's keep it to what we've discussed here today. I think, I mean, obviously, there could be recommendations on how to better train precinct election commission members. If you want to be specific to the Polish case, to what happened, I think these 13 polling stations where we had recounts, these could all, they most likely have been human errors, most likely not like completely by accident, not intentional. So I think it is important to recognize the work of the thousands of people who work in election commissions every election, but also recognize that maybe the way that they are trained and the tools that they're provided with could be improved, and we should be doing better in terms of helping them out. But looking more broadly, I think it is really time that institutions, and I'm not just talking about electoral institutions, but all kinds of institutions, realize that it is the public that is their client. We have the saying in Polish, frontem do klienta. So like it is time to face the client and realize that, you are not some kind of a tower that needs to be, climbed by people who are seeking the right to information, but you should really be more forthcoming, more transparent about what you're doing and how you're doing things, and use the opportunities that you are given to engage in a constant dialogue with your clients, with the public. And this is, I think, the best way to build trust. We should really not be shying away from even hard discussions, because this is only for the improvement of our democracies and our institutions.
Thank you very much. I think it's a perfect conclusion. Yeah, I think we should also somehow think about how we deal with the whole information sphere in general, how we educate people about this, because I haven't heard about any dedicated education in the schools, how to use social media, and how to avoid a misuse. of it, and it should be somehow discussed also. Also in the context of politics and elections. Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. There was a point of critics from Stefan Schwed that we tried to discuss too many issues at once, and I understand it. Yeah, that is how it is. We have limited capacities and so many topics to discuss, so we try to at least to flag some of the key issues within our webinar series on different elections in the region. But thanks, Stefan Schwed, for flagging this, and the Q&A. Yes, this is yeah, we are relying on the technology available to us, and but we can and we should perhaps improve. Thank you very much, Zosia Ludkiewicz, Sonia Chorądziak, Dominika Bychowska-Siniarska, for this interesting discussion. This webinar is being recorded, so it will appear on our YouTube channel. And yeah, so stay tuned with EPDE, and see you soon at the next webinar on the elections, I think in Moldova. Thank you very much. Bye.